My name is Sarah, and I'm a mother to a wonderful child named Timmy. Timmy is 8 years old, but life hasn't always been easy for him. Born with cerebral palsy, Timmy faces challenges that many of us can't imagine. His legs don't allow him to run or jump like other kids, and his speech comes slowly, but when he smiles, it lights up the whole room. Timmy has always had a big heart, but he struggles to connect with others, making playdates and birthday parties a rare treat for him. For weeks, I had been planning his birthday party. Timmy doesn't get to celebrate like other children. His condition means he often has to sit out on group activities. His birthday, though, was going to be different. I worked tirelessly to make sure it would be a day he'd never forget. We had a small but intimate gathering with a few of his close friends from the neighborhood, and I carefully organized everything to ensure Timmy could enjoy the day without a worry. It wasn't about the number of people or how grand the party was. It was about creating a rare moment of joy for Timmy, where he could feel like any other child, surrounded by love, laughter, and celebration. The day had arrived, and for once, I saw my son truly enjoying the company of others. For me, it felt like a dream come true, a moment of normalcy that I didn't know we would ever get to experience. But what I didn't expect was the storm that was about to disrupt it all. The birthday party was in full swing. A beautiful spread of cake, snacks, and drinks filled the tables, and kids ran around, laughing and playing. The atmosphere was light, joyful, exactly what I'd hoped for. Timmy sat at the table, his eyes bright, a wide smile on his face as he finally took a bite of his birthday cake. For once, he wasn't on the sidelines. He was fully immersed in the moment. It was rare for him to be so involved, so carefree, and I cherished every second of it. The air was filled with the sweet smell of cake, the laughter of children, and the chatter of neighbors. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. But little did I know, the peace wouldn't last long. Just as the party was in full swing, I heard a loud, unmistakable voice. I turned to see Karen storming into the backyard, her eyes immediately locking onto the scene. She wasn't invited, but there she was, marching toward us with her usual scowl. When she saw Timmy eating his cake, her face twisted in disgust. "What is that child eating?" she yelled, her voice cutting through the laughter. I felt my stomach drop as she marched over to us. Her tone was sharp and judgmental. "Feeding him cake is irresponsible. You're poisoning your own child with that garbage." Karen spat as if she had any right to judge my decisions. Before I could even react, she moved swiftly. With one violent swipe, Karen knocked Timmy's plate from his hands. The cake crashed to the ground, splattering across the grass. Timmy's wide, shocked eyes stared at the mess in disbelief, and before I could say a word, Karen's hand came down again, this time across his cheek. The entire party froze. Silence filled the air. Timmy trembled, his tear-filled eyes locked on Karen as she stood there, arms crossed, her face smug. The tension was unbearable, and I could barely hold back my anger as I turned to face her. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Neighbors gasped, their eyes wide with shock. Timmy stood frozen, staring at the ground where his cake had fallen, his face pale and filled with confusion. I rushed to his side, kneeling down to check on him, my heart pounding with anger and disbelief. I pulled him close, trying to comfort him, when I turned to Karen, my voice shaking with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded. "Why did you do that?" Karen stood there, arms crossed, an almost smug expression on her face. "I was protecting him," she said, as if the words made any sense. "Eating that unhealthy food is dangerous for a child like him. He needs better choices." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You have no right to touch my child, Karen," I snapped. "You don't get to decide what's best for him or anyone else." But Karen wasn't backing down. She looked at me with contempt, her voice dripping with judgment. "Maybe if you were a better parent you wouldn't let him eat that garbage. You're not doing him any favors by letting him eat whatever he wants. It's child abuse." I felt the rage boiling inside me, each word she said cutting deeper. How dare she lecture me on how to care for my own child? My hands shook as I clenched my fists. "You crossed a line today, Karen. This isn't about food, this is about you trying to control everyone's life. You've hurt my child, and that's something you can't take back." The tension in the air was palpable, and I knew it wasn't over yet. Karen wasn't finished making her ridiculous claims. But neither was I. As the tension thickened, a neighbor standing at the edge of the party suddenly pulled out their phone, quietly recording the confrontation. The camera zoomed in on Karen, her angry face still frozen in disbelief as she stood over Timmy, arms crossed, clearly pleased with herself. The moment the recording hit the neighborhood chat, it was like opening a floodgate. The video spread quickly and the reactions were swift. People began to take sides, and soon the entire community was talking about what had just happened. Some were outraged, others shocked, but everyone had an opinion. Karen, realizing what was happening, immediately lunged toward the child who had recorded her, trying to grab the phone from their hand. "Delete that. Now," she screamed, her face flushed with anger. But it was too late. The video was already online and the damage was done. Within minutes, neighbors who had once been silent or too intimidated to speak up began to voice their anger. "That was uncalled for," one neighbor muttered, stepping forward. "She's crossed a line." Others began to nod in agreement. "She hit a child, this is serious," another said. Even people who had once sided with Karen out of fear or complacency were now starting to express their outrage. A few suggested involving the police. "This is assault," someone whispered. "We can't just let this go." As if on cue, Karen stormed back to her house, but she wasn't done yet. She fired off a message to the neighborhood chat, doubling down on her actions. "I was only protecting the child from poisoning," she claimed, as if she had the authority to make such judgments. "From now on, we need strict rules on what's acceptable to eat in this community, no more unhealthy foods at gatherings." But instead of rallying support, her message only fueled the fire. Neighbors began to revolt, mocking her attempts to control everyone's lives. "Who is she to decide what anyone eats?" one neighbor posted. "She doesn't get to lay down the law about food." The once silent majority had finally found their voice, and Karen's reign of control in the community was crumbling. What had begun as a small confrontation was now snowballing into a movement. The neighborhood was done with Karen and everyone knew it. After the shocking incident at Timmy's birthday party, I knew it was time to take action. I couldn't let Karen get away with what she had done, not to my child and not to the whole community. I composed a formal complaint to the HOA, detailing the assault on my son, her overreach in imposing her dietary rules, and the emotional damage she caused. I wasn't just doing this for me or Timmy, I was doing it for every neighbor who had been quietly intimidated by her over the years. The moment I sent the complaint, the support started pouring in. Messages from neighbors flooded my phone. "You did the right thing," one said. "We're behind you," another texted. It felt like the community, which had once been so divided, was finally coming together. The solidarity was overwhelming. People were ready to stand up to Karen. Some neighbors suggested involving the police, but I held off, wanting to first see how Karen would respond to the growing backlash. The video of the slap had gone viral, circulating through the neighborhood group chat and beyond. Karen was already on the defensive, but I needed to see how far she would go in her attempt to control the situation. A few days later, the HOA board called an emergency meeting to address the growing complaints about Karen's behavior. People were finally starting to speak up. Some who had long been afraid of Karen were now ready to tell the truth. The room was tense, and as the meeting began, the board started to investigate her actions. One by one, neighbors stood up, recounting the details of Karen's outbursts and her attempts to control the community, including the assault on Timmy. It didn't take long for Karen's behavior to be exposed for what it truly was: manipulative, abusive, and out of control. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position on the HOA. The power she had wielded over the neighborhood for so long began to unravel. As the news spread, the neighborhood rallied behind me. People who had once been silent now stood together, ready to rebuild what Karen had destroyed. Her reign of terror was over. For the first time, I felt a sense of peace returning to our community. We weren't just surviving under Karen's control anymore. We were thriving, standing strong and united. And as for Karen, well, the consequences of her actions had only just begun. The day Karen was officially removed from the HOA was nothing short of a celebration. The moment the vote was passed, a collective sigh of relief seemed to ripple through the entire community. No more bullying, no more overbearing rules. Just peace. Neighbors who had been silent for so long were now speaking freely, discussing how they'd never felt truly heard until now. Everyone was relieved to be free of the fear that Karen's influence had cast over us for so long. As for Timmy, we weren't going to let Karen's actions ruin his special day. We threw a second birthday party, this time without the dark shadow of Karen looming over us. The atmosphere was completely different. The air was filled with the sounds of joyful laughter, children running around, and Timmy smiling as he played with his friends. For once, I didn't have to worry about someone judging us or ruining the moment. Timmy was free to just be a kid, and it was the happiest I had seen him in a long time. Looking back, I realized how much this experience had changed me, and how much it had changed our community. Standing up for Timmy, for our family, had shown me just how strong we could be when we fought together. It wasn't just about one person taking a stand, it was about a whole neighborhood coming together to support each other, to protect one another. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. As I looked around at my neighbors, I realized something important. This wasn't over. Karen had been removed from the HOA, but her manipulative ways wouldn't be easily forgotten. There was a chance she would try to come back to cause more trouble, but for now the community was stronger. Timmy was happy, safe, and finally free from the toxic influence that had threatened his peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. The future was uncertain, but the one thing I knew for sure was that we weren't going to let anyone take that peace away from us again.